Hello. I am Nikki the Great coming at you again with another message. If you have not already, please subscribe and hit that little notification bell so that you can be made aware of any new videos that I post. Today, we're going to be discussing one of many lost books of the Bible. We're going to be talking about the Book of Enoch, and I'm going to share with you 10 things that I learned from the book and 10 things I hope that you can take home. All right, so stay tuned. The very first thing I want to share with you is of Enoch. Enoch was actually the great grandson to Adam. There was a prior Enoch, which was one of the sons of Adam, but that wasn't the Enoch that we're going to be discussing in this book. Okay, so he is the second Enoch of the descendants of Adam. All right, and another thing about Enoch is that his main purpose, his goal, was to record. Okay, and Enoch recorded everything. He was like a mediator between the fallen angels, man, to God. Okay, so he recorded things that man did, he recorded things that the fallen angels did, and he reported to God. And I strongly believe that Enoch is still up there becoming and being this great recorder. Okay, he was taken to heaven after, I believe it was like 83 years. He was taken to heaven to be with God, and that's where he is today, in heaven, probably still recording. Okay, Enoch also in this book had amazing conversations with angels. He had amazing conversations with angels. He had plenty of dreams and visions that he wrote in great detail of the future of what was to come. And there was a lot of parables in the book of Enoch. Also, the book of Enoch is consisted of several different chapters. So there's a lot of organization of it. All right. And so certain parts of the book of Enoch was actually written by, well, small parts, I believe they're written by his son Methuselah. Okay. Enoch was the father of sons and daughters. He also was married. He had a wife. I believe her name was Edna. So he passed this book and other books that he has written. The book of Enoch is not the only book that Enoch wrote. He wrote many of these books, and he passed them down to his son Methuselah, who was, I guess, the next in rank after him, after he went up to be with God. And Methuselah, he walked in the statutes of his father, and he wrote, and he also passed things down for the next generation. Also, Enoch is the great grandfather of Noah. I'm not sure if you knew that, but he's the great grandfather of Noah. Okay, and the second thing I learned was of the fallen angels and what they did. All right. The book of Enoch talks about there were 200 of them, exact in number, that roamed the earth, that interacted with men. Okay. There was 200 of them. And the leader of the fallen angels was named Shemyaza. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And one thing that is so crazy is that the name Lucifer was not mentioned, not one time in this book. Lucifer was not mentioned one time in this book. And I found that really interesting. Either he was nowhere in this equation during this time, or he had a different name, which we're going to be discussing later. But Lucifer was nowhere in this 200 fallen angels. All right. And these fallen angels, the term fallen angels is used interchangeably with the phrase the Watchers. Okay. So Enoch referred to them constantly as the Watchers. All right. And these fallen angels, they ended up having inappropriate relationships with the daughters of men, with human women. All right. And they took human women as wives and went in unto them and had children with them, which produced these giants. All right. And in no way was this okay for them to do it. And what they did was a huge sin, because when these giants grew up, they wreaked havoc on the world. They did a lot of, they practiced cannibalism. They sacrificed humans to for their own pleasure. They drank human blood. They did a lot of evil things. The fallen angels also taught these women and their children, the giants, secrets of heaven. So you're probably asking yourself, what kind of secrets? And these secrets are mind-blowing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share these with you. But if you want details, you're going to have to read the book. All right. First of all, these fallen angels taught women to do charms and spells and potions and how to cut roots and make this witchcraft. Okay, so witchcraft originated from these fallen angels teaching these things to the women that they were married to. And these women passed these things down to the giants, and it kind of just got into human civilization to practice witchcraft and charms and spells and things like that. The next thing, like I mentioned before, the giants ate men. They were cannibals. They ate men. They took children that were human children, and they sacrificed them to each other. They drank blood, and they did a lot of heinous things like that. All right. The next thing that the fallen angels did was they polluted the birds and the fish and the animals. Okay. And the book does not go into detail how they polluted the animals, the fish, and the birds, but I'm left, okay, with kind of having my mind drift off into the origination of dinosaurs. All right. So the fallen angels taught man how to pollute birds, fish, and animals to kind of, I believe, to crossbreed them. It does not mention dinosaurs in here. I'm just throwing my little 2 cents in there. It again does not go into detail how it polluted them, but in response to the bloodshed from the fallen angels and them producing these giants, and from the pollution of God's creation that was supposed to be perfect and pure, the earth cried out. Okay, the animals cried out, and we're going to talk about that later in one of our next things we're going to discuss. But they taught man how to pollute the animals, the birds, the fish. Okay, it also the fallen angels also taught them how to make weapons, taught them how to make swords, how to make spears, how to make breastplates. It taught them how to make eye makeup. The fallen angels taught people how to dye their hair. Okay. They also engaged in a lot of fornication. They engaged in a lot of fornication, a lot of adultery, a lot of sexual promiscuity was influenced to mankind by these fallen angels. All right. And another crazy thing is astrology. Okay. The fallen angels taught mankind about astrology, and it's really popular nowadays for people to ask you, what is your sign? And you tell them, I'm a Sagittarius, or I'm a Taurus, or whatever. All that information comes from the fallen angels and them influencing mankind with believing in this astrology that really doesn't have any substance. Okay. And what happened with the fallen angels doing this, again, the earth began to cry out in this great spirit, which I'm going to talk about later. Azazel, these are different angels. And yes, the Book of Enoch is very descriptive on these angels and the fallen angels. I believe like 20 or 25 of them were mentioned and exactly what they did. I'm going to share that with you. But Azazel, I'm probably butchering that, but it taught eternal secrets for bad, and he was greatly, greatly punished. Yes, Enoch was one, as a great recorder, recorded all these things that these fallen angels were doing, recorded their names and exactly what crime that they committed to humanity. Okay. What the Watchers ended up doing was writing a petition after they got in trouble for going in unto the daughters of men. So the Watchers went to Enoch and said, yo, Enoch, I really need you to write this petition to God on our behalf, because we know we are in a whole lot of trouble and God has condemned us. Okay. So Enoch, as being the mediator between the fallen angels, man, and God, went to God with the petition of the fallen angels. And what do you think God said to Enoch to tell the fallen angels? No. Super no. Absolutely no. Their petition was not granted on the behalf of men. And God told Enoch to tell them, instead of having a man petition for you, fallen angels, you need to be petitioning for men. And so there was no way that they were ever receive forgiveness for what they had done. Okay. Another thing that I learned is that angels are not made of flesh like we are made of flesh. Okay. We are made of flesh that is mortal and that can die, but angels are not made of that. I guess they're made of another substance. What that substance is, I don't know. But the reason why angels cannot procreate is because they're immortal. Okay. So they don't need to procreate because they're going to live forever. We as humans, we are mortals. Okay. And so we need to procreate to keep our species alive. And that's why God gave us this gift. And so it was a huge no-no, a huge transgression for the fallen angels to go into these women and create these giants. Okay. And that's where the Book of Enoch talks about, that's where the origination of sin came in, to humanity, was with the fallen angels. And it also mentioned that it was one of the fallen angels that got Eve to take of the fruit. Okay. Also, another thing that the fallen angels did was they exposed secrets. One of the secrets was that the fallen angels taught men how to mine the earth for precious metals and stones and what to do with them and how to use them. Okay. It also talks about, I'm going to go ahead and jump the bullet right here, but there is an angel that is in charge of the precious stones and metals of the earth. Okay. So the fallen angels taught man how to take these and do things with them that are not in alignment with God and the purpose that God has for them. Okay. Another thing with the fallen angels is that this book gives you all their names, all their sins, as well as their punishments. Well, not all their names, but a good majority. I'll say about 25 names that were mentioned of the fallen angels. Okay. All right. The third thing that I want to discuss about this book is heaven. Okay. Heaven was described as a great, wonderful place. And the first thing that he mentioned was that there are 4 lead angels in heaven. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail in this segment of the video, but it's easy to have. Gabriel and Michael are the most popular ones in scripture that we have in the Holy Bible. But there is Michael, of course, Gabriel, Suriel, and Uriel. Okay. And Uriel is going to be talked about a lot later on. But these four angels are like, I guess, the generals or the lieutenants of heaven. Okay. The next thing about heaven that Enoch talked about is that there's different dimensions of heaven. Heaven has different different scenes, if you may, like different rooms in a house. Okay, that's a good way to describe it. It's like heaven is a great big house and there's lots of different rooms in it. Okay. There's prisons in heaven where, I'm going to talk about that later. Okay. Where if stars don't obey, and yes, stars are living creatures, they're living organisms that have names. If they don't obey or if they do something out of line, they go to prison. All right. There are desolate places in heaven. There are beautiful places in heaven. Heaven is like a big, ginormous mansion with a lot of different rooms in it. Okay. And that, it also, has, some of these stars that live in the heavens have a series of different names. Earth has a different names besides Earth. The moon has different names other than the moon. There's 4 names that the Book of Enoch mentioned that the moon is called. And let me go ahead and give you this little tidbit. It also says that the earth and the moon are the exact same size. The Book of Enoch said that twice, and I read that book at least 3 times just so I can get my facts straight. So the earth and the moon the moon and the sun. The moon and the sun are the exact same size. The only difference is that the sun has 7 times more light than the moon does. And the sun also, it goes into graphic detail about the sun and how the sun has different dimensions of light in it. Okay. In heaven, there are gardens. Like, at the beginning of time, there was the Garden of Eden, which God put down here. So God loves gardens, and he has many different gardens in heaven. And I'm going to mention, I believe, 2 of the gardens that are mentioned in heaven. There is the Garden of Righteousness, and and there is the garden of life, okay? The garden of righteousness and the garden of life. The tree of knowledge and wisdom, it is in the garden of righteousness. And it also mentioned that there are animals in the garden of righteousness. Okay, and it talks about no two animals are alike. You know how in the Garden of Eden, God created an animal, but then it had a mate to go with it. Up there in heaven, no two animals are alike. They are all different. All right, and with the garden of life, it didn't really go into a whole lot of detail about the garden of life, but they went into graphic detail about the garden of righteousness. So if you want to know more about it, you got to read it. Okay. Another thing is that there are gates and doors in heaven. All right. And there's more than just 12 gates. There's a lot of doors that Enoch mentions in heaven. Each gate, each door has a job, has a purpose. Certain things flow out of certain gates and doors, and certain things receive out of the gates and doors, and the spirits that come from man or from the earth come in and out of these gates. Okay. And one thing that I'll talk about, the north wind. The north wind comes out of one of the gates of heaven, and it is in charge of cold, hail, hoarfrost. I'm not really sure what hoarfrost is. Okay, we'll move on. Hoarfrost, snow, fog, and rain. Okay, I probably should have looked it up. So if you have a moment, go on and look up what hoarfrost is. The Book of Enoch mentions a lot of hoarfrost. Okay, and it also mentioned that angels are able to see the greatness of God's work, and it also mentions that us as humans are going to be able to see the greatness of this work of his. So it gently reminds us that are reading it that just like Enoch is able to see all these things, in time we will be able to see all these things. Okay. The next thing, which was amazing, is the art of writing. Like I mentioned earlier in number 1, ink and paper and transcribing is an art that came from heaven. Okay. It's something that the angels, the fallen angels, also taught man about, putting pen to paper. Now, I don't really think back then it's the same how it is now. Like, I have a piece of paper right here and I'm able to write on it. Well, I'm sure it's going to be a little different if you've got tens and thousands of people doing something at the same time and writing all that down. So the method is I guarantee it's different than how just being able to single-handedly write one thing at a time. So I'm sure there's like a whole different dimension of writing that they use in heaven. Okay. The next thing about heaven that I wanted to share with you is that, again, different gates pour and produce different things. All right. So prosperity can come out of one gate, but then, revenge can come out of another. Okay. So there are, I don't want to call them bad things, but heaven and God and that whole thing is not all peaches and roses, rainbows and bubbles. Like there's punishments that happen in heaven. God's not like some hippie that just sits up there on a cloud. There are things mentioned of him as, in one of Enoch's passages, he writes about a huge building that God lives in. And Enoch says this building is so huge, it was unable to be calculated. It's unable to be measured. Number 4, I want to talk to you about hell. Okay. Hell wasn't really mentioned in the Book of Enoch, but there was some references that kind of pointed to a direction of a possible hell existing, or a hell coming, or a hell that's already in waiting for some inhabitants of it. Okay. Enoch constantly talks about an abyss of fire. Okay. And the sun and fire coming, or he talks about fire being created to consume the unrighteous, consume the fallen angels. Okay. It talks about a judgment day. The Book of Enoch goes on and on about a judgment day, about waters of judgment, releasing a judgment day. It talks about it doesn't say doomsday, but it makes mention to a great special doomsday. A judgment day is coming, and he does mention judgment. He also mentions of a great balance, a great judge, balancing what either the fallen angels have done or what us man have done, and there's a weighing to see if the person or the individual did right, I guess, in the eyes of God, in the eyes of what he was called to do. Okay. And there's going to be a lot of secrets revealed on this judgment day. There's going to be a lot of secrets revealed on this judgment day. It also talks, well, again, about the waters of judgment. That was kind of peculiar when it talks about, it said, the waters are going to release judgment. Okay, so again, there's a lot of kind of parables in the Book of Enoch. So it doesn't really say how these waters are going to release the judgment, but I do know, as Christians, we know that God is going to be the great judge. How that is going to be played out is still kind of questionable, but again, we don't need to know everything. Okay. All right, the fifth thing that I learned was about the holy angels. And oh my gosh, it had such wonderful information about the holy angels. If you are into the angels and what they do and what they look like and what their jobs are and how they talk and how they interact, I'm telling you, the Book of Enoch is so phenomenal and eye-opening. Okay, let me stop teasing you, get into it. I want to talk to you about, I think there's 6 or 7 in one particular passage that were mentioned. I'm going to tell you about them. The number one was Uriel. Okay, Uriel was the angel, I believe, that had the most, that communed more with Enoch, showed him around more, answered more, of his questions. And when Enoch, when he was first visiting heaven, he never did it by himself. He always was in the company of Uriel or in the company of a group of angels. All right. And they all interacted with Enoch. It's so beautiful. It makes me so excited. The first one was Uriel. Okay. You're probably asking yourself, well, who was Uriel? What did he do? Uriel was in charge, or is in charge of the spirits of men. Uriel has, I want to look at him as a jack of all trades, but he is in charge of the spirits of men. Okay, so when people have kind of like the notion that, and it probably is true to a certain extent, the Book of Enoch doesn't mention it, but people kind of have like this thing of guardian angels kind of just showing up and following people around. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but Uriel is the main person that is in charge of the spirits of mankind. So he's like the angel of angels. All right. Again, when people, this was not mentioned in Enoch either, but I really believe that when people have visions and dreams of heaven and talking to somebody, it's probably Uriel that they're talking to in these dreams or in these visions. He seems to be the one that has a lot of interaction with Enoch, and it kind of puts him in a different light and kind of puts his name out there so that it's not just Michael and Gabriel, and in no way am I trying to decrease any value from him, but we want to know about the other angels too. Okay. Number 2, Raguel, okay? And he is in charge of the vengeance of the world, all right? He's in charge of the vengeance of the world. Also, I forgot to tell you that Uriel is in charge of the stars and the sun. He's in charge of the lights also, all right? The third one is Michael. He's in charge of mankind. He's in charge of the nation. All right. Saraguel, I hope I'm not butchering these names. If I am so sorry. Saraguel, he's in charge of he's in charge of the spirits of men who cause spirits to sin. All right. I'm not sure exactly what that means in detail, but that's what it said he did. There's Gabriel, okay, one of the popular ones. He's in charge of the serpents, the garden, the cherubims. He's in charge of other angels. All right. And there's another angel named Raphael. Okay. And they probably got that, when I heard the name Raphael, I instantly thought of the Ninja Turtles, but we're not talking about that. Enoch talked about, there are 4 figures in heaven. He had a vision, okay, and I hate to bounce around, but there's so much information. I'm trying to be considerate of time. But Enoch, in one of the visions, he saw a large population of people in heaven, and he said that large number no man could number, just like when we read about in our holy scriptures we have today. There is a number that no man can number, and there's like a sea of people, and he talks about this great multitude that he was not able to count, and there was God there with this great multitude of people, and there were four figures that stood by God singing praises to the Lord. There were four figures standing singing praises to God. And so yes, the Book of Enoch went into detail who these four figures are. Well, the first one was Michael. Okay, he was singing blessing the Lord. The second one was Raphael. He was blessing the chosen one and the chosen who depend on the God. So not only was Michael praising God, but Raphael was praising the people, I guess, for getting there. The third one was Gabriel. He was petitioning, praying on behalf of the ground dwellers. There was Phanuel. He was his praises were driving away the Satans. Okay, and the Book of Enoch does refer to the Satans. It doesn't say Satan, but it says Satans. All right. And it also leaves room. I'm going to get into this later on in this video, but it leaves room to, you know how we refer to as Satan here on earth? Well, Enoch refers to Satans. So there's more than just one. All right. And the next one is that I'm skipping ahead of myself again. But when the flood came, an angel was the one that released the floods. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. Also, we're going to talk about Uriel because he's like my favorite angel. He's in charge of the lights of heaven. He's in charge of the stars. And when I say stars, I'm including the sun. He's in charge of anything that has to do with light. So, of course, he's got the moons, whatever they're at, and all the stars. Okay. He also was having conversations and answering questions of Enoch when it comes to astronomy. All right. And he defined astronomy in like, oh my gosh, it was such a phenomenal thing. The way that Uriel was talking to Enoch and telling him about these things. And it was so funny because, well, I don't know if it was funny, but Enoch would ask Uriel, what is this? And it's like every time Enoch would ask Uriel, the angel, hey, what is this? What does this mean? Where does this come from? Uriel would always ask him back, why do you want to know this? And so he always asked Enoch that, well, why do you want to know? Why do you want to know? And so Enoch would give him an answer, because I want to know everything. That was the main answer that Enoch would give Uriel. Well, not just that, I want to know everything. Like Enoch just tell him, just tell me what all this stuff is. And so Uriel would go into detail about the sun, about the moon, about the stars, about everything. And it was so beautiful that it leaves, you know, in the book of Genesis, God says, let us make man in our image. Okay. So these angels, they are, I don't want to say they're a part of humanity, but you can tell by the way Enoch conversed with Uriel that he had a lot of human qualities, like humanity, like he had humanity. He knew who we are. And it also leaves me in a point to where they understand our curiosity. They understand our plight, our flight, you know, and they're the things that we suffer with today, the things that we want to know today. God does not want us to be ignorant. He does not want us to be ignorant. And with the Book of Enoch, he purposely influenced Enoch to write all these books. And he allowed Enoch to go to heaven and witness all these things so he could write these things down. He allowed the angels to answer all the questions that Enoch had so that Enoch can share these things with us today. Not for us to keep this information or to hide it in a vault, but for us to pass it down to the next generations. God wants us to know him, okay? And so in no way am I trying to erase any of these 66 books of the Bible, but there is so much more information out there for us as followers of God, as people of his creation to know. Okay, so don't ever limit yourself to just that Bible. It's said to have had it. The Book of Enoch does not mention this, but it does say that there are books, plural. There are books out there for us. Okay, and with my own research, there are hundreds, probably even thousands of lost books of the Bible that people have written, that God has influenced and shown them things. Okay, so I am going on a little going down a rabbit hole right here, and I'm gonna get back to what I was talking about. But don't ever limit yourself just to the Holy Bible. Like, just don't limit yourself to the King James Version. If you do that, you're not able to get a big picture. And even with the big picture, the picture is even bigger. All right. So back to what we were talking about. Okay. Uriel also explained to him how time is ruled. So he talks about the seasons. He talks about where they come from. He goes into awesome detail about all of that. All right. He also talks about the organization of time. All right. And if I'm not going to go into detail about it, but I am definitely encouraging you to read the Book of Enoch. And if you don't want to sit and read it, it's also on here on YouTube. Number 6, we're going to be discussing the spirit world. Okay. And with the spirit world, we want to receive this information with an open mind. Okay. Consider that a little disclaimer. But the spirit world consists of 4 things that were mentioned in the Book of Enoch. Okay. It mentions the fallen angels, it mentions demons, it mentions devils, and it mentions spirits. Okay. Fallen angels, demons, devils, and spirits. All right. So, there's a scripture, we do not wrestle against, how does it go off the top of my head? Something about we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against principalities. Well, those are some of the principalities of those 4 main things that were mentioned. All right. And that when it comes to the spirits, it mentions that the spirits of dead men are heard in heaven. The righteous dead men are heard in heaven. There was a verse in Enoch that talked about, I think it was Abel. Abel was killed by his brother Cain. And even though it was many generations before Enoch came, his spirit, Abel's spirit, was still crying out because during a conversation, I think it was with Uriel, but Enoch did have conversations with the other angels. They did answer questions and stuff, but Uriel came up a lot, but I'm not sure which one answered his question. But Enoch heard a crying out. And so Enoch had asked one of the angels, like, what is that noise? And one of the angels said, that is Abel. His spirit continues to cry out for his, I don't want to say vengeance, but for judgment on how he died, or the person that killed him. So when the righteous die, I'm not sure the details of it, their spirit can still be heard in heaven. Okay, so it's not just something that just disappears. All right. The next thing is everything has a spirit. And spirit and voice, those 2 words are kind of used interchangeably. All right. So the wind has a spirit or a voice. Okay. The dew, the rain, the waters have a spirit. They have a voice. The earth definitely has a voice, and the earth has a huge voice. And I believe, it doesn't mention it in here, but the earth can hear the voices of creation. Okay. You know how they refer to it as Mother Earth? The earth can cry out for pieces of itself. All right. So in the beginning of this video, I was talking to you about, how the giants, what they were doing to the earth and what they were doing to mankind. One of the spirits, or one of the voices that were crying out, was the earth crying out for the people, crying out for the birds, crying out for the fish. It was crying out. So one of the things that I learned from the Book of Enoch is that everything has a spirit. Okay. Everything has a spirit. I hope I don't get in my feelings with this, but when I was a kid a long time ago, I saw a poster in one of my elementary school classrooms, And it was a picture of a little kitten, and it was crying out in the picture. And the caption read something like, God hears even the smallest voice. So allow this to be another little rabbit hole I go down, is that I'm encouraging you that no matter how small you might think you are, no matter how minute you might think you are, no matter how condensed people might try to make you feel, God hears every voice. Every voice has a spirit. And no matter in what condition you are in, no matter what situation you might find yourself in, when you cry out, not only is your spirit being heard, but the earth is crying out for you. Number 7, we're going to talk about the flood and the ark, okay? So the reason for the flood was to erase and wash away all the foolishness of the influences and the damage that the fallen angels had done to the world, had done to the earth, had done to mankind, okay? And this part right here gets kind of tricky. Noah, again, was like the great he was a descendant of Enoch, okay? And Noah was, he was close to Enoch, and actually Noah had conversations with Enoch in heaven, and Noah loved God. He loved his commandments. He really was a righteous, upright man. And it's because of his diligent prayers to God and talking to Enoch that the entire world was not destroyed. Okay. So there was times when the Book of Enoch mentions a time when Noah pleaded and was crying out to God on the behalf of man, on the behalf of the earth. Okay. And it was so bad. The earth was so disrupted and polluted and abused by the fallen angels and these giants, and that the earth had turned on its axis. That's what the Book of Enoch makes mention. The earth turned on its axis. The earth was grieving out because of the sin and the iniquity and the foolishness that was going on. Okay. And Noah cried out desperately because of the fallen angels and their disturbance on the earth. Okay. So the things I mentioned earlier, what the fallen angels do, that's probably just a drop in the bucket compared to the foolishness that they were really doing. Okay, Noah was found pure and innocent before God. All right, and when it came to the making of the ark, there was a reference in the Book of Enoch that mentioned that the actual angels built the ark. Okay, it mentioned that the angels built, well, it didn't say the ark, it said angels built the wood structure. Okay, the angels built the wood structure. All right, and when I was talking to one of my colleagues, she, I haven't read all the last books of the Bible. This right here is my first one, but she had mentioned in another lost book of the Bible, I don't know if this is true, but she said that Noah was albino. He was albino, okay? And I'm going to leave that right there, okay? I'm not going to co-sign that just yet because I haven't read it for myself. But when it came to the waters being released, the waters of the flood were released by an actual angel, okay? They were released by an actual angel. And the Book of Enoch also mentions that there was a strong sulfur smell that came before the angel released the waters, all right? I'm not sure exactly what the sulfur smell was, but he mentioned sulfur. And you know that sulfur's got that weird kind of odd smell to it. It doesn't mention, I don't know if it mentioned the flood, I can't remember, but it mentioned the destruction of the world, okay? And in this same area, it mentioned that Enoch prayed to God not to destroy the world prior to the flood, but to leave a righteous seed. Okay, so God was going to destroy the entire world, okay? But since Noah was talking to Enoch, and Enoch was the one that heard him, like, yo, like, I hear you hollering, like, tell me what's going on. And so Noah was talking to Enoch about it. So Enoch, being the great transcriber and the mediator between man, the fallen angels, and God, went to God and like, yo, spare the world. I have found a righteous seed, Noah, which is a descendant of Enoch, and leave a righteous seed through Noah on the earth to repopulate the earth. All right, let's go on ahead and move to number 8. We're going to be talking about parables and visions. All right, there was at least a huge chapter about parables, okay, and I believe another chapter about visions. And if you are, in no way am I a Bible scholar, I am not a theologian. I love to read the Bible because I love God, I love Jesus, I love just reading it for myself, on a novice level. But I love reading about visions and reading about parables. Okay, the only thing about the Book of Enoch, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the parables and the visions, is that with the Bible that we have today, and if you are like me, if you sat through a lot of sermons and pastors and they teach about parables and what they mean and what you can take from it, so it kind of spoils us. So a lot of the parables that are in the Bible that Jesus talked about, they have been broken down by people already. So these parables that I've come in contact with, there's no one there to break them down but me, okay? And so I haven't heard of any pastors or theologians talk about the Book of Enoch and the parables and the visions and what they really mean, okay? So sometimes there is a mention, let me see here, there is a mention kind of the flood, but then there's another mention of a hell, of a doomsday coming. And sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of decipher the two. But in the some of these parables and visions he mentions animals. Now, you know how like Daniel and Ezekiel in the Holy Bible, they mentioned a lot about animals and what the animals were doing. Now, in things that I have read on, and I'm giving you a little bit of background before I get into these, okay, so I can show you kind of where I'm coming from. There is a representation of each thing, okay? That animal represents something, all right? And so with Enoch, there is a parable of two beasts being thrown down. One beast lands on the land, the other beast lands in the water, okay? And these two beasts, one's name is Leviathan. One's name is that. I don't remember the other one's name. It's a very short, simple name. But these two beasts, they rise up, okay? And again, you have to read it for yourself, but there is mention of these two beasts. It's also mentioned of a chosen one coming. Enoch mentions that all the time, of a chosen one coming. Now, he does not mention Jesus, but it kind of leaves my imagination open that God, back in the days of Enoch, back in the early civilization, the first couple generations of humanity, he already knew he was going to send a chosen one. Okay, so way before Jesus got here, there was already a purpose designed for Jesus. Okay, so a chosen one, and there's also a term referred to as the chosen people, which are us. Okay, I want to believe it's us, the chosen people. So he makes a lot of mention of the chosen one and the chosen people. All right. Again, when it comes to when it comes to the visions, there's other animals like that were mentioned in the visions. Animals such as elephants were mentioned. I want to say he mentioned something like about a camel or a llama or something like that, and about their. He talks about two oxes being white, and the oxes get together and produce elephants. And he goes on and on. I can't make heads or tails of it. When you read it, because I pray that you will read it, maybe you can leave me a message and tell me how, what you came up with that. But there's a lot of visions and dreams, and parables that Enoch has left. Not only Enoch, but some of these passages are written by his son Methuselah. So there's conversations between God and Methuselah. There's conversation between the angels and Methuselah. So the book of Enoch has a mixture. Majority of it is of Enoch, but there's some passages that are from Methuselah. And Methuselah had some visions, and he had plenty of visions of these animals and elephants and oxes, and I think a goat and a lion and stuff like that he made mention of. All right. Number 9, we're going to talk about the sun, the moon, and the waters. I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. There are male and female waters that the book of Enoch makes mention of. Okay. The male waters are the waters that are in the sky, such as the rain, the clouds. That's male. What's also male is the sea. Those waters are male. Now the female waters are located inside the earth, in the depths of the earth. Those are female waters. Okay. So if you read in the book of Genesis, when you're reading about creation, God mentions that he separates the waters. There's male and female waters that he separated. Okay, so he put the male waters on top and the female waters are within the earth. And when the flood had came, it's made mention that the angel released these waters. So he released the male waters and he released the female waters. Okay. Another thing is of the moon, like I mentioned to you about, he goes into great detail about the moon's job, the names of the moon. He makes mention of the days, how they coincide with the seasons, with time, and the same thing goes for the sun. The sun has got different names, and it's a really, really beautiful thing. And we're going to slide into number 10. The 10th thing that I learned from the book of Enoch is God's coming back to earth. Enoch makes a lot of mention of God coming back to earth, okay? And it leaves me in a place of a lot of the things, a lot of these things are new things you probably haven't heard of, but these things go hand in hand with the things that we already know from the Bible, okay? So it's not like it's completely different information, whole, like 100%, but there are things that are also mentioned in Enoch that's written in the Holy Bible that we have today. All right. And so those are the 10 things that I learned from reading the book of Enoch. Again, I am Nikki the Great, and together we are growing, sharing, and thriving.